Hello and welcome to Madico U. Today we're going to talk about solar control film, and this is a series of trainings that we're going to call solar control film training. Today's lesson 1, terminology. So lesson 1, the characteristics for solar control film and terminology. The first terms we're going to talk about is total solar energy. This is all the energy that comes from the sun and reaches us here on the Earth's surface. Ultraviolet light, visible light, and the infrared energy from 300 to 2500 nanometers. Some people refer to this as heat, not to be confused with the infrared energy, which also can be referred to as heat. In general, though, heat is calculated from all three of these wavelengths of ultraviolet light, visible light, and infrared energy. So total solar energy can be reported in 3 different values: the transmitted percentage, the reflected percentage, and the percent absorbed. Transmitted percentage is the amount of total solar energy that passes through the glass in a building or an automobile. The lower this number is, the less solar energy is transmitted through the glass. Reflected percentage is the amount of solar energy that's reflected off of the glass and back outside. Any of this energy that's reflected does not transmit through the glass into the building or the automobile. Absorbed percentage is the amount of total solar energy that's absorbed into the glass. This heats up the glass and can make it hotter to the touch. Some of this energy is radiated into the building, but most of it's radiated back out of the building or the automobile. So getting a little bit into the solar energy, one of the first things we want to talk about is visible light. Visible light is the light that we can see that comes from the sun. This varies in color from red, which are longer wavelengths, around 700 nanometers, to violet, which are shorter wavelengths, around 400 nanometers. This can also be broken down into several different factors. The transmitted percent, that's the amount of visible light that can pass through the window. A darker number here is a lower number. So a limousine tint would have a VLT of around 5%. Reflected percentage is the amount, can be broken into 2 factors, exterior and interior. The exterior is the amount that's reflected off the surface and can be seen from the outside of the window. A high reflectance value here would look more like a mirror, while a low reflectance value will look more like natural glass. The same could be said for the interior, except this is the reflection that's seen from the inside looking out. A higher reflectance looks more like a mirror, while a low reflectance here looks more like natural glass. There's one thing that we can calculate from the visible light that's transmitted. We can do a ratio between the visible light transmitted with film and without film. That ratio is referred to as the glare reduction. A very high glare reduction is a filmed glass that blocks a lot of visible light, and a low glare reduction is a filmed glass that doesn't block as much light. There's 2 values that can be calculated from the solar energy that refer to how much heat is transmitted through the glazing. The first is the solar heat gain coefficient. This is the ratio of the solar heat gain that enters through the window or the fenestration, which could be a window, a door, or a skylight. That ratio is the amount that goes through to the amount that's incident on the glazing. A high solar heat gain coefficient is a glazing that allows more energy to come in. A low solar heat gain coefficient is a glazing that allows less solar heat gain to come in. An important distinction between this and the shading coefficient is the solar heat gain coefficient accounts for how much energy is absorbed into the glazing that's re-radiated, conducted, and convected in through the glazing. The shading coefficient does not account for that. So shading coefficient is the ratio of heat passing through a filmed window to 1/8 inch clear glass. So the shading coefficient of 0.5 has 50% of the amount of heat coming in compared to clear 1/8 inch glass. There's two values that can talk about how spectrally select the glazing is. The first one is luminous efficacy. This is a ratio of the visible light to the shading coefficient of a window. A higher luminous efficacy means the film has a high heat rejection to its VLT. The next is the light to solar heat gain coefficient. This is the ratio of visible light to the solar heat gain coefficient. A ratio of greater than 1 means that more daylight is passing through the glass than heat is passing through it. Typically, a glazing over 1 is referred to as spectrally select. You can look for ones that are greater than 1.2 for something that's even more spectrally select. So just like solar heat gain coefficient calculates the amount of energy that's transmitted through the glazing, total solar energy rejected is a calculation that tells us how much energy is rejected by the glazing. So this can also be referred to as heat rejection. Infrared energy rejection is the amount of infrared energy that is blocked by the glazing, either by reflecting or absorbing it. Madico measures the entire IR region, from 780 nanometers up to 2500 nanometers. It's an important distinction between Madico and some other manufacturers. Some will only measure at a single wavelength or a very narrow region in the IR. There's another value out there that's been recently endorsed by the IWFA called infrared energy rejection. So just like total solar energy rejection, infrared energy rejection is the amount of infrared energy that's rejected by the glazing over the entire spectrum from 780 nanometers to 2500 nanometers. This infrared energy rejection value takes into account that heat that's absorbed in the glass and is radiated in, while infrared rejection percentage does not. The U factor is a measure of how much heat is able to transmit through the glazing based off of a difference in temperature from the outside to the inside. So in the summer, heat transfers from the outside to the inside based on temperature difference, while in the winter, heat transfers from the inside to the outside. So a lower U factor is a better insulator, and it can keep the heat inside in the cold weather climates and the heat outside in hot weather climates. Emissivity is the ability of a surface to reflect infrared energy. For window film, this means how much heat we can re-radiate back into a room. More commonly referred to as low E or low E glass or low E film, these are products that have a low emissivity, which means that they can reflect the heat back into the room. These are more desirable in cold climates because we're trying to keep the heat in the winter so that we can keep heating costs down. Ultraviolet rejection is the amount of UV energy that we block with film. We can do this by reflecting it or absorbing it. This is the UV that we do not allow to enter the building or the automobile. The higher this number, the more UV rays that we're blocking. You can reach Jay or myself by email or cell phone. Here you see our contact information. I'm Jesse Manship, by the way, and Jay Larkin, my colleague, is on as well. Um,
Good morning.
Good morning.